It's been a busy day and a long day at the Idaho State House. A good day for firing squads, a bad day for feminine hygiene products, and who knows what to make of public school vouchers. But we'll try. Because after months of debate about whether or not public funds should be used for private or religious education, the Idaho legislature is considering putting that question on the ballot for you to decide. Remember when Iraq had weapons of mass destruction and we were set on destroying them and Saddam Hussein? America declared war on Iraq 2 decades ago. We're looking back at what that meant for Idaho. You know, we watch this happen every year. In fact, we can see it coming when at some point, late January, early February, we see committees just aren't meeting, floor sessions just end early. And then we get to the end of the legislative session like we are now, and all of a sudden, short days turn into long evenings. Time is winding down, which means lawmakers are putting in the extra time to get done by their unofficial goal of this Friday, that'd be March 24th, to end it all. That remains to be seen if they make that, but lawmakers, they're going to be operating in high gear all week to hopefully hit that goal. So let's bring in Joe Paris now, because, you know, as a fast start to today, I guess we can call it just kind of a movement Monday, because several big ticket items, libraries, we're talking like school vouchers, corporal punishment, those are all kind of trying to make a move today.
Yeah, and this is to me, okay, so there's two different ways to look at this. This is an exciting part of the legislative session for me, Brian, because after weeks of waiting for action, all of a sudden in one afternoon, you're going to get a lot of movement on things. But yes, let's take a look at some of the big things that are making final moves today. And a final note for you that is making headlines around the country and the world today. That is because Idaho lawmakers have sent a bill to the governor's desk that would add the firing squad as a secondary method of execution in the state of Idaho. Long story short for you, Idaho has had a very difficult time getting the drugs needed to do a lethal injection, and Idaho isn't alone in that. Pharmaceutical companies no longer want their products used for the death penalty. So Idaho has a death row inmate that they've tried to put to death, but continue to have issues getting the chemicals. So in comes House Bill 186, and it is one signature away from being law in the state of Idaho. Governor Brad Little can sign it as soon as this week, and the idea, it already passed the House. So lawmakers knew today that this was the final debate on the topic, adding the firing squad. Supporters say this is about carrying out law and order. Critics of the idea question the consequences.
I've seen the aftermath of shootings, and it's psychologically damaging to anybody who witnesses it, anybody who has a hand in it, anybody who plays a role in the aftermath and the cleanup and all of the logistics involved. It's, in a word, brutal. And the use of the firing squad, in my opinion, is beneath the dignity of the state of Idaho.
There are some who have argued, you know, let's just find another method. Let's come up with something. There are other drugs that we can use. We are constrained and restrained, whether we like it or not, by limited methods of carrying out this policy. And this is one that we know will withstand all of the legal machinations that will continue to be thrown at the policy rather than the method.
So final tally in the Idaho Senate for you this afternoon, 24-11, the bill passed. Let's head back, though, to the first thing this morning. Lawmakers on Monday morning, they're at work talking again about education savings accounts. And in short, it's a concept that would allow public tax dollars to be sent to private, religious, and homeschool students for use on their education journey. Now, the case for ESAs centers on families believing that public school is not the best option for their student, so they would rather have tax dollars meant for their student sent in a different direction. For months, we have watched different pitches on the idea. Funding and oversight, they've been major debates. At the center of it all, though, there's a question that lawmakers have debated and heard a lot from Idahoans on. Should tax dollars be allowed to be sent to private education ventures? Well, lawmakers are ready to ask Idahoans outright. Here's the pitch in House Education.
Should the state of Idaho, the Idaho legislature, or any state agency direct or appropriate public tax dollars to private K-12 schools, including private religious and for-profit schools? And the question would just be a simple yes or no answer.
So this would be an advisory vote that would end up on the ballots. And to be clear here, this would not be a binding question. Think of it as a survey from the Idaho legislature. They want to get a feel from voting Idahoans about the major question. So that ballot question would go on the November 2024 ballot, and lawmakers could do whatever they want with the results. And the vote does not preclude lawmakers from taking action on ESA at this year or next year or anytime soon. Finally for you, it was a decision day in the Idaho House on one of the most talked about bills in years, harmful content in libraries. House Bill 314, the Children's School and Library Protection Act, would require public schools and community libraries to take reasonable steps to restrict children's access to obscene material. There could be a civil penalty against the community or school library, though, for $2,500 if it's found they didn't take steps to do that. Lawmakers have gone back and forth on this topic for months. Here's what the debate looked like before the final vote in the House.
All we're asking is for them to take reasonable steps. What's unreasonable is to leave them in sections of the library designated for minors. And then what we're essentially telling parents is, we're not going to look out for your kids. So either you walk with them every step of the way, looking over their shoulder, or you don't send them to the library.
Parents, not librarians, not legislators, are specifically responsible for the content that their children get at the library. And we're so worried about librarians and libraries and what they're doing, and yet I would submit to you, I know very few children that have become porn addicts from the public library. I would submit to you it has more to do with internet access and phone access to the internet.
So, Brian, after about 2 hours of debate and back and forth, that law, or that proposed bill, I should say, did pass the Idaho House by 10 votes. Heads over to the Senate now.
What's interesting about ESAs or vouchers, it went from it's happening this year to now, well, let's talk about it a couple more years and see if we can make an advancement on it there.
And kind of the advisory question we touched on also brings up another question. Is ESAs the way to go, or is there another avenue as well out there?
All right. Thanks, Joe. Well, speaking of libraries, there's a chance a bunch of them could just go away if a group of Meridianites get their way. In about an hour, those living within that district will get the chance to voice their opinion on whether the Meridian Library District should be dissolved. And can libraries just dissolve like a scene from an Avengers movie? Well, a group who calls themselves Concerned Citizens of Meridian gathered enough signatures, 93 of them. They believe they can, because they believe the Meridian Library District provides books and other materials on their shelves targeted to sexualizing minors. They claim the library is contributing to the, quote, sexual indoctrination of minors, and the board members refuse to talk about it.
But we are here to do what we can to ensure that the library conforms to the wishes of concerned citizens of Meridian, especially responsible parents who want to protect their children from the Marxist indoctrination that seems to be sweeping our country.
We believe that this insidious growth that's happening in our world must be stopped in its tracks. And one way we intend to do that is by restricting the kinds of subversive materials available to our children in our libraries.
Today, our libraries have permitted evil influences to enter its premises. By evil, I mean the increasing influence of the satanic community's belief system.
All right, well, this isn't a new topic, and it isn't isolated to Idaho either. The attention on libraries across the country has magnified in recent years, continuing to spill over into community conversations, even political campaigns. Supporters of the library say parents, not the state, nor a small group of citizens making big accusations, they should decide what their children get from the library.
It's really sad that a small group of folks are willing to dissolve the library, shut it down completely, rather than let families make their own choices about what they want to read, as they've done for nearly 100 years. We have communicated, we've met with them, we've shared the tools that they can use to monitor what their children are checking out, how they can find materials that fit with their interests and values. We have shared that the thing that they are seeking, which is restricted access, people not being able to access the books that they want in a public library, will not withstand a First Amendment challenge.
So you can expect a big turnout tonight in that meeting, just about a half hour now, on the first floor public hearing room at the Ada County Courthouse. After the hearing, the Ada County Commissioners, they're going to decide if they're going to put it on the ballot, that decision for voters to decide. Again, this is just for those who live within the Meridian Library District. If you don't live there, well, then you don't get to say anything. All right, we're going to dip back over to the legislature because, there was a touchy subject being discussed on the House floor today. Touchy for some of the men in the room anyway, who you could see, and one who even admitted was not very comfortable talking about it. They were debating House Bill 313 about whether to require all public and charter schools to provide free feminine hygiene products to girls, 6th grade to 12th grade. Okay, wouldn't be free. It would be free, I should say, to the girls, but it wouldn't be free to the state because the bill sponsors estimate it would cost Idaho an extra $735,000 in discretionary funding to do this, something like $3.50 for each female student in the public school system. Too much for 35 members of the House, though, who voted against it. It was a split vote, 35-35, meaning it didn't pass. So Idaho will not require schools to provide feminine hygiene products to girls, but school districts can still decide to do so, like many already have. But the argument against it was highlighted by what Republican Representative Heather Scott, who called providing such things to a girl who didn't plan for such a thing, well, she called it a very liberal policy. And by passing it would turn Idaho into a bigger nanny state than ever before. And something like, well, wouldn't even break the top 1,000 issues concerning our voters, she said. What's next, she said. She wondered, when does this end? Will we provide deodorant for students next? Well, for those of you who've been in a room full of middle schoolers going through puberty who haven't gotten into the practice of putting it on at home on a daily basis, yeah, maybe we should. Anyway, Representative Scott stood to debate against the bill, and she lamented how pervasive a policy like this is.
What I find interesting is this legislative session, 113 bills just like this one are being pushed across the country, all dealing with this topic. To me, this is an agenda, and I don't know how you couldn't but see that.
Agenda bills? How can you not see that? Has anyone told Representative Scott about, I don't know, any ESG bill or any transgender bill or any library bill floating around the State House? And 113 bills? Aren't there only 50 states out there? More than a handful, by the way, already have a policy like this in place. But Representative Scott believes by passing this bill in Idaho, it would make us more of a nanny state, just like those bastions of liberal values like Alabama and Utah, who passed similar bills last year, and West Virginia, who voted this year to give free feminine hygiene products to girls in schools. But Representative Scott wasn't finished.
I guess in final point here, what really concerns me is why are our schools obsessed with the private parts of our children? There is a difference between tampons and pads. And to teach our, sixth graders how to use tampons, that's a problem, in my opinion. Keep our schools away from our children's private parts. Vote no against this bill.
And she did. But the question remains, is it schools who are concerned with our kids' private parts, or the people who want said schools to check our kids' private parts just to use a bathroom? Is it schools who are concerned about private parts, or those who want to remove sex ed books for kids from library shelves? All of these are good questions that we would have for Representative Scott.
Our nation enters this conflict reluctantly, yet our purpose is sure, and I assure you, this will not be a campaign of half measures, and we will accept no outcome but victory.
20 years ago, you either heard that speech from President George Bush on Wednesday night, March 19th, or you woke up Thursday, March 20th, learning of the announcement we were going to war with Iraq. Months earlier, Congress had already approved the use of military force against the country we first fought back in 1991 because we were led to believe Saddam Hussein was stockpiling WMDs, or weapons of mass destruction. Weeks later, President Bush would stand on the deck of the aircraft carrier of the USS Abraham Lincoln under the giant Mission Accomplished banner. Remember that? To declare military operations were over in Iraq. They weren't. The war went on for another 7 years. Well, today, to mark the anniversary of the official beginning of that war, we're digging into our archives to take a look back at what we were talking about just before and just after President Bush uttered the words, "My fellow citizens." The buildup to the Iraq War began years before and was rekindled with the takedown of the Twin Towers.
It was anything but life as usual after the September 11th terror attack. They prompted protection Idahoans hadn't seen before. Barricades blocked the state capitol building. Guardsmen patrolled the airport. On the brink of war, today the nation is on heightened alert.
An alert sparked by what we were told was a buildup of weapons of mass destruction.
Every measure has been taken to avoid war, and every measure will be taken to win it.
With those words from President Bush, it appears war with Iraq is imminent.
So in the days leading up to that war, Boiseans straddled both sides of the line drawn in the sand decades ago. Those who wanted peace.
Killing innocent people isn't really too attractive to me. And I think fighting over oil isn't too great either.
We don't want Bush's war!
Following the rally, protesters took their message to the streets of Boise, marching from BSU to the State House for another gathering against war.
And
those,
as the United States of America and President Bush as our leader,
who wanted peace through the use of force.
Defend the Iraqi people from tyranny.
These ralliers say this is not pro-war, it's pro-America.
We all want peace, but sometimes you have to have absolute defeat of the enemy, and I believe this is a fight of good and evil.
And we have a very clear message for President Bush, and that is the people of the state of Idaho support our troops.
Then on March 19th, 2003,
my fellow citizens,
President George Bush
at this hour
explained
American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
Why we were going to war.
On my orders, coalition forces have begun striking selected targets of military importance to undermine Saddam Hussein's ability to wage war. These are opening stages of what will be a broad and concerted campaign.
In the days following, Idahoans were left to wonder what that meant.
It's something that a day don't go by that I don't think about it.
I feel like our freedom's at stake here. If we don't take care of this man, he will do things in our country that will affect our freedom daily.
Everything's going up, the gas prices, the grocery prices, everything else you can think of.
You know, it's always going to be in my mind, and I'll think about what's going on. You cannot think about it.
Thoughts that weren't far from the minds.
Now that conflict has come, the only way to limit its duration is to apply decisive force.
Of our airmen in Mountain Home either.
To stay focused, they're training all the time. Nowadays, pilots are using an Iraqi scenario. The threat stays the same. Old Russian fighter jets and surface-to-air missile systems.
Our job is to be ready.
I know that the families of our military are praying that all those who serve will return safely and soon.
I am honored and blessed.
People from all different faiths went to St. John's Church in Boise to pray for both American troops and Iraqi people.
I'm really feeling a sense of grief for the war and all the victims, the Iraqi people, our soldiers, and all the pain that the world is suffering right now.
The people of the United States and our friends and allies will not live at the mercy of an outlaw regime that threatens the peace with weapons of mass murder.
As bombs explode in Iraq, there is still a concern of biological or chemical retaliation here in the United States. Idaho's first responders say they are now prepared to deal with smallpox in the event of a bioterrorist attack.
That threat,
my fellow citizens, the dangers to our country and the world,
we would later learn,
will be overcome.
Wasn't real.
We will pass through this time of peril.
But the impact of the president's declaration,
we will defend our freedom.
Certainly was.
We will bring freedom to others, and we will prevail.
Back off! Back up! While hundreds of anti-war protesters across the nation got arrested for civil disobedience, it was a much more subdued scene here in Idaho. A somber but peaceful all-night rally wrapped up this morning at the State House steps. And some good news in this time of war. The stock market had its strongest week in 20 years. The Dow is up 662 points for the week, closing the day above 8,500.
You know, the U.S. has been through several periods of economic uncertainty. It's capitalism, after all, including this time 100 years ago. An economic depression struck the ag sector in the early 1920s for a number of reasons. And the Idaho State Historical Society says about 500,000 farmers across the country would go bankrupt by 1924. Before that, though, Governor of Idaho at the time, that'd be Charles Moore, he signed a law aimed at helping the farmers here in Idaho. A newspaper article in the Caldwell Tribune from March 20th, 1923 says, Governor Penn's name to bill of real relief. Farmers were struggling to pay their property taxes, were getting fined for every year they did not pay. The article says House Bill 94, which provides that real property may be redeemed before it is sold for taxes delinquent for the years 20, 21, and 22. You had to pay it, plus interest at 7%. Bill got farmers out from underneath a continuously growing debt. It just goes to show that Idahoans have been asking for property tax relief for a long time, including, well, this legislative session. There is a bill, though, currently working its way through the State House that will hopefully do just that. All right, well, he made it. Not in time to get through last week, but after a long haul through the Alaskan wilderness, Idaho's Jed Stevenson finally crossed the finish line in Nome, Alaska for the Iditarod race. He did it late Friday, but unfortunately, he didn't get last. 28th place. He did not get the Red Lantern Prize. One spot shy of that last place finish. We rooting for that we were hoping he would get at least something to take home with him, right? And $1,000 would go with that Red Lantern Award, too. It took Jed a little more than 12 days and 44 minutes to travel about 1,000 miles. Winner of this year's race, though, crossed that finish line well ahead of Jed about 3 days earlier on Tuesday. All right, let's get right to your comments here on this Monday, like this one from Rob. Which is it, caring about our children at birth or before, or not caring after? Idaho legislators, please tell us. We are confused as to your intentions. Do Idaho schools pay for and stock first aid kits or Band-Aids? Are they too liberal and woke for Idaho, asks Paul. Agenda bill, this has nothing to do with private parts. This has to do with the health products for those who cannot access them. Differentiate, says the running educator. Don't they already have dispensers for feminine hygiene products in the girls' restrooms? Yes, but not all schools. They choose. Sometimes they get donations to provide for them, but they're not always there. Why should taxpayers be held accountable for this when teachers are underpaid and parents are providing so much already? They can just do their job. That's a good point, but this would provide money from the state. I guess schools will stop providing toilet tissue if Heather Scott has her way. That was brought up, by the way. They do provide all that stuff. Am I a resident of Meridian? Isn't that a mineral? What do you call somebody from Meridian?